All right, my friends, let's finish this implementation. Indeed, we're very close to the end. We have already implemented step 1, step 2, and step 3. And now we just need to finish this by, updating these variables that were created and initialized right before this big for loop iterating through the round, through the users. All right, so let's start simply with this one, add selected, which is the full list of all the ads selected over the round. So let's paste that here. Here I'm back inside this first for loop iterating through the round. And right now, how do you think we must update this add selected variable? Well, simply, of course, we have to add to this list the ad that was just selected, right here, in this second for loop. All right. And you know the trick, there is this append function in Python that allows to add an element to a list. And well, that's exactly what we're going to use now. We're going to add a dot here, then add append for the append function. And inside this function, you have to input the element which you want to add to this add selected list, right? And that's, of course, add. That add variable that was computed here in this second for loop. All right, so that's how you update this first variable, add selected. Then next step, next step is simply to update this variable now. Numbers of selections, which is a list of 10 values corresponding to the 10 ads. And for each of these values, you have the number of times the ad was selected up to round n. That same round n we're dealing with right now in this first for loop. All right, so let's paste it right here. And now, according to you, how are we going to update this variable? Well, since this ad, was just selected in this new round n, therefore we need to update the element of index add. Basically, the index of the ad that was just selected inside this numbers of selections list, we need to update that element by incrementing it by 1. All right, so here, not only we need to take this list numbers of selections, but we need to take mostly the element of index add, meaning the index of the ad that was just selected. And then you have two ways to do this. The first classic way is doing a plus equals 1, which increments this particular number, the element of index add inside this numbers of selections list by 1. Or, if you don't like this notation, you can simply do a equal, then you copy this again, you paste that here, and you just add plus 1. As you want, that's exactly the same, depends on how you prefer to see it. Okay, then let's update this variable, sums of rewards, which is the accumulated reward for each of the ads in the same list of 10 elements corresponding to the ads. So I'm copying this, then I'm pasting it here. Then of course what we need to change inside this list is that element of index add, that index of the ad that was just selected. So there we go, let's here add in a pair of square brackets add, the index add of the ad that was just selected. And then same, we're gonna update it again, we're gonna take that. And then, according to you, what do we have to add to this sums of rewards, and especially to this element of index add inside this sums of rewards list? Well, that's exactly the reward that we got by selecting this ad. This ad which had the maximum upper bound. And where do we have these rewards, for each of the ads? Well, that's of course in our data set, right? This data set is a simulation telling us for each user on which ad they're going to click. We don't know that in reality, but this data set is a simulation, and therefore we have for each user and for each ad if the user clicks yes or no on the ad. And since now we know with which user we're dealing with thanks to this round, because the round here corresponds to the user, and since we also know which ad was selected, because of this second for loop, we can directly access the reward that was just received at this particular round and for this particular ad that was selected. And the way to do this is simply to take here our data set, right? Because this is the original data set, but remember that we created the pandas data frame in this data set variable. So we need to take our data set, and then remember we need to add a values, to access a particular value of this data set. And then we need to enter inside some pair of square brackets. First the index of the row of the cell we want to access, which is of course n, because n corresponds to the user, meaning the row. And then we need to enter the index of the column of the cell we're dealing with, which is of course the ad that was selected, because now we need to get the reward of the ad that was selected for the particular user we're dealing with right now in this first for loop. And that's exactly dataset.values and add. Okay? And now I'm just going to do something so that it's really clear to you that this is the reward we got at this particular round n. And in order to do this, I'm going to take that here, cut it, and right between these two lines of code, I'm going to create a new variable, which I'm going to call reward, so that I can really highlight that this is the reward, the reward collected after showing this ad to this user n. This is the reward, and therefore here, I'm just going to add reward. All right, so that you can clearly see that very important concept in reinforcement learning. It's all about the reward that is collected at each round, and then the accumulated reward. And speaking of the accumulated reward, well, that's exactly our next step here, because indeed, the last variable which we have to update is that variable computing the total reward we get up to round n. And now you will perfectly know how to update that total reward variable according to you. What do we have to do here? Well, we just need to add to this total reward variable that last reward which we just got at this round n, meaning this reward of selecting the ad and showing it to the user n. All right? And that's it, my friends. Now the UCB algorithm is fully implemented. If this sounds a bit overwhelming, well, I really encourage you to try to implement that fully again, because really you just have to follow a logic and then everything makes sense. So I understand that, this is the first time we implement such a code because, so far we've only worked with libraries, so it was simpler before, but you also need to know how to implement such algorithms from scratch. And so here it's really good that we did it, but don't worry if it feels a bit overwhelming. You just have to, either rewatch the videos or try to re-implement this from scratch yourself. And I promise you that this will sound easy peasy, okay? So no worries, do this again if needed. And whenever you're ready, meet me in the next tutorial to plot the final histogram, which will show us exactly which ad was identified as the best ad, the ad with the highest conversion rate by this UCB algorithm. I can't wait to show this to you, and until then, enjoy machine learning.